Ever felt trapped in, like, a bureaucratic nightmare, or maybe feeling guilty about something, but you don't even know what? Chances are you've brushed up against something. Well, Kafkaesque. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the mind of Franz Kafka. A literary giant, really. His unsettling vision. It still shapes how we understand modern anxiety, existence itself, even.
It's a really fascinating journey. We're not just looking at his, profound works, but also this captivating literary mystery. It involves his lost writings and this extraordinary woman who actually defied his final wishes to save his legacy.
Right.
We're pulling insights from, various places, online literary archives, reports from the San Diego State University's Kafka project, basically giving you a shortcut to understanding this really remarkable figure.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Kafka, an author who died largely unknown, right? But now his name, Kafkaesque. It's basically shorthand for this unique, unsettling feeling. What was it, beyond just, annoying paperwork, that he captured that still hits so hard today?
Well, what's truly amazing about Kafka is that whole posthumous rise. He was born in Prague, 1883, died tragically young, only 40, in 1924 from tuberculosis. And like you said, mostly unpublished, unknown at the time.
Yeah.
Yet now, he's seen as this major 20th century literary genius. Some even call him the father of the modern novel. His major works, things like The Trial, The Metamorphosis, The Castle, America, they just articulated this singular, really unsettling vision of the world.
And he wrote in German, right? His stories, they're as described as visionary, profoundly enigmatic, often with this sort of grotesque take on individuals just burdened with guilt, isolation, anxiety, caught in this futile search for personal salvation. What was it about his approach that made that feeling so potent?
He was completely consumed by the writing itself. There's that famous quote where he said, "I need solitude for my writing, not like a hermit that wouldn't be enough, but like a dead man." Yeah. I mean, that really gives you a sense of the intense, almost spiritual level of dedication it took to create those worlds.
Yeah.
It wasn't just telling stories for him. It felt more like an existential need.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting for me. We hear Kafkaesque thrown around a lot, for anything just weird or nightmarish.
Yeah.
But you're saying the real meaning is much more specific and, frankly, maybe even more disturbing in how relevant it still feels.
Absolutely. Yet the real core of Kafkaesque isn't just oddness. It's about oppressive bureaucracy mixed with this absurd, impenetrable logic. Think about systems where, there are rules, but the reasoning behind them is totally inaccessible. Or maybe just makes no sense.
Like Joseph K. in the trial.
Exactly like Joseph K. prosecuted, but he never finds out what crime he supposedly committed. That is quintessential Kafka.
So the harder the character tries to fight it, the more tangled up they get, like those endless bureaucratic loops in the castle. And there's that strong element of dehumanization too, isn't there? Where people just become case numbers or files. It almost makes you want to, bang your head against the wall sometimes.
Oh, definitely.
I swear, just last week, dealing with an insurance claim, I felt exactly like Joseph K., trying to figure out what procedure I'd violated.
It's a disturbingly common feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, how does this actually play out in our own lives? Where do we bump into this kind of absurd logic?
Well, think about real-world stuff. The sheer frustration of, say, a healthcare system denying treatment because of some tiny paperwork error you can't even fix. Or legal trials where the accused literally cannot understand the charges against them or the process itself. It goes way beyond just simple red tape. It really digs into those existential, psychological dimensions of feeling utterly powerless inside this huge and different machine. So it's not just the external rules, but the internal feeling they create. That absurdity of existence, maybe? Or that sense of guilt without a crime? Or even questioning free will, like, are we just puppets following invisible strings? It really makes me think of philosophers like Albert Camus. Was he picking up on Kafka's specific brand of existential dread?
You've absolutely nailed it. Kafka's work often runs parallel to, or even anticipates, the ideas that existentialists explored later. That search for meaning in what seems like an illogical, indifferent universe. That feeling of being just a small, uncomprehending part in a giant, unknowable system. That's a hallmark of existential thought, and Kafka just expressed it with such chilling clarity.
Okay, so this profound, often unsettling vision. What does it mean for us today? For you, listening? Whether you're a writer, a thinker, or just, trying to navigate modern life, Kafka seems to offer some pretty unique insights beyond just the gloom.
Definitely. One of Kafka's most, maybe chilling insights isn't just about mastering the uncanny, making the familiar strange, but how easily we often accept the absurd when it creeps in. He shows that precise moment reality starts to bend, and how our sort of innate human need for order can actually make us complicit in our own confusion. Think about Gregor Samsa in the Metamorphosis. Wakes up as a giant insect. Okay, grotesque metaphor for alienation, sure. But the family's reaction, it quickly shifts towards normalizing this completely bizarre situation.
Right, how they adapt to it.
Exactly. So as a writing exercise, you can try this. Take a totally ordinary situation, maybe a job interview, then introduce just one completely irrational element. Maybe the interviewer only communicates through, I don't know, interpretive dance.
Okay.
See how quickly that ordinary setting becomes deeply unsettling.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. But how do you strike that balance, between making something unsettlingly strange and just making it so weird that readers check out?
That's a really good question. And Kafka's a masterclass here because he rarely explains his worlds. He leaves you, the reader, grappling with the meaning. That ambiguity, as you mentioned earlier, is key to his power. Over-explaining just kills the mystery, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
We see this principle in modern stuff too, like episodes of Black Mirror, which often nails that same kind of disquieting ambiguity. Another big lesson from Kafka is writing as like a form of survival. He wasn't writing for fame, definitely not. He wrote to endure his own mind, really, to confront his deepest fears, just to exist. There's that incredible quote, I write differently from what I speak differently from what I think differently from the way I ought to think, and so it all proceeds into deepest darkness. He shows writing as this raw act of processing reality.
And finally, there's this thing sometimes called the Kafka trap. His main characters are often incredibly passive, right? Just swept along by forces they don't understand. For writers, I guess the danger is making characters too powerless. So much so that readers just disengage because there's no one to really root for.
Exactly. It's a real pitfall. But the counterintuitive solution, or what Kafka shows us, is balancing that huge oppression with small, maybe even futile-seeming acts of defiance. Think about Joseph K. again in the trial. His appeals are relentless, even though they seem totally hopeless.
Right.
It's about showing persistence, that little spark of agency, even when facing an absurd, crushing world. That persistence itself, even if it doesn't win in a conventional sense, is a kind of quiet defiance. It reminds you that even when the system looks unbreakable, the individual choice to keep pushing, to keep questioning, has its own meaning.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now. From his published work to a genuine literary enigma, the search for Franz Kafka's lost writings. It seems incredible, but despite his huge posthumous fame, everything he wrote, even doodles, apparently published in every major language, his literary legacy is still somehow incomplete.
And that immediately raises the question, why is it incomplete? Well, because his very last writings, we're talking about 35 letters and 20 notebooks, were confiscated, taken from his final love and companion, Dorothy Diamant, by the Gestapo in Berlin in 1933.
Wow, the Gestapo.
Yeah, just imagine the historical weight of that loss, let alone the literary significance.
And Dora Diamant herself, she's such a compelling figure, the only woman Kafka ever actually lived with. And many people credit her with making his last year his happiest. He died in her arms in 1924, and apparently her devotion to him just never faded.
Right, and while she's sometimes mistakenly remembered as the woman who burned his work because he did ask her to burn things, she actually secretly saved much, much more than she destroyed. She recognized its importance. And that's where the Kafka Project comes into the picture. It's not a new thing, actually. It's the third official search effort to try and recover these specific writings. They work directly for the Kafka estate in London.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit volunteer group based out of San Diego State University since 1998. And they're basically building on earlier efforts by Max Brod, Kafka's original executor, and another researcher, Klaus Wagenbach.
So they've been at this for decades, meticulously working with the German government, digging through complex archives, Nazi archives, East German Stasi archives in Berlin.
Exactly. It's incredibly complex detective work. Their searches spread across Eastern and Central Europe. They've even looked into archives the Red Army captured and later returned to East Germany.
Wow.
And they're not just using old school methods. They're exploring things like AI handwriting recognition to help sift through potentially vast amounts of documents.
That's amazing dedication.
It really is.
Yeah.
The project's currently led by Kathy Diamant. She wrote a book called Kafka's Last Love, The Mystery of Dora Diamant and Christoph Geiss. He's a retired psychologist, specialized in trauma actually, who took over the lead in Germany in 2023.
Interesting background for this kind of work.
Yeah, his expertise is apparently uniquely suited for the really intricate, sensitive kind of research needed. including investigating the still-secret archive, Section IAC Apollo, which they've identified as a possible place where Dora's papers might have ended up. The sheer persistence is extraordinary.
And this isn't just like a dusty historical project. It's active. Things are happening now. Like, for instance, just this year, 2024, a previously unknown drawing surfaced. A drawing of Dora Diamond by Kafka himself, unveiled at the Bodleian Library at Oxford. Apparently it was found on the back of the final page of his last story, Josephine the Singer, which he wrote when they were separated.
It's an incredible find, isn't it? Almost poetic. It's on loan from the Broad collection, and you can actually see it online now via the National Library of Israel.
Oh, great.
The Oxford exhibit was apparently hugely popular, and it's since moved stateside to the Morgan Library and Museum in New York City earlier this year, still drawing big crowds.
And Dora's own story seems to be getting more attention too, finally. There was an online exhibition, an 18-minute documentary about her, both produced in 2024.
That's right.
Plus, two German actresses, Henriette Confurius and Tamara Romero-Ginés, got a lot of praise for playing Dora. One in a film, The Glory of Life, and the other in a TV miniseries called Kafka. Both came out in March 2024.
Yeah, The Glory of Life, that film, even premiered in the U.S., picked up some awards like the Audience Choice at the Austin Jewish Film Festival in 2024. It definitely shows this real renewed interest in her and in that whole final chapter of Kafka's life.
So what does all this mean for Kafka's legacy? How might finding these missing writings actually change how we understand his work? It seems like we know so much already.
Well, that's what's potentially so transformative. These missing writings, they're thought to maybe detail a period of unprecedented peace and acceptance in Kafka's last year. If that's true, finding them could radically shift our whole understanding of his profound, often quite bleak, literary vision.
So it might not just fill in gaps, but actually recolor the whole picture.
Precisely. It could add this unexpected shade of, maybe not hope exactly, but acceptance or serenity to his final thoughts, which would be huge. So until these materials are found, his literary story, as complete as it might seem, really does remain unfinished. It's about trying to find those final, crucial pieces of the puzzle for one of history's most important and often unsettling literary minds.
So whether you've personally grappled with that absurd logic of bureaucracy or just felt that little twist of reality that makes something familiar feel suddenly strange, you've probably experienced a touch of the Kafkaesque. And behind that powerful concept, there's this real-life mystery of a literary giant and these ongoing, tireless efforts to complete his story.
Kafka's true genius, I think, lies in his uncanny ability to articulate the modern human condition. That feeling of being lost in systems we can't control, searching for meaning in what often feels like an indifferent universe. His works challenge us, they disturb us, but they also profoundly inspire us to look deeper.
So as you reflect on this deep dive we've taken today, here's something to maybe mull over. In your own life, where do you encounter systems that feel unfathomable? Or maybe moments where resistance just feels futile? And think about this. How might discovering a lost writing in your own world, maybe a hidden truth, a forgotten perspective, or an unacknowledged piece of your own history, how might that illuminate your understanding of the complex, sometimes deeply Kafkaesque world around you?